A year ago I had applied to a Bachelor's of Education course in NURG. Teaching seemed a pragmatic option in the ways of ensuring employment for myself. In every shape and form it was a compromise with my basic instincts, where I felt obliged to be pragmatic but desperately wanted to do something creative, and not work in a repetitive environment of which there was no self-satisfaction for one's effort. Teaching experience for me had only served to illustrate further that my interests would be marginalised by the process, and my own desire for further education would only become more and more esoteric and methodological. The straw that broke the camel's back for me was scraping PVA glue off a 10-year-old's forehead after he glued himself to the table to spite a fellow classmate. In some ways it was like a bland bread and butter sandwich. Tasteless. Deciding to seek no approval in the choice of my masters but my own, I thought it was really a risk when 20 years old, applying for a masters. In some ways like a coin toss, where you only decide what outcome you desire when the coin is in the air. The act itself is meaningless. A fork in the road is too literal a metaphor for something as arbitrary as choosing a college course, in that it does not seem completely incongruous to suggest something else. Who takes these photos is the only thing that occurs to me. In conclusion, teaching is most certainly a profession I would have considered, but I thought it needless to limit myself when the passage of time means less and less to the youth of today. What I really enjoyed from my undergraduate was writing, but I could seldom hold a conversation outside of college without mentioning film. When the option of screenwriting came up, teaching seemed immensely bland by comparison. I intended to start as thoroughly prepared as I could. Of course this didn't happen, and at first it felt like the cinematic demands placed upon us made it difficult to keep our heads above water, as it were. Initially I found the course to be daunting. It was far less constrictive than my undergraduate and made me immediately aware of the expanse of which I was not aware of. It's like a small fish in a big pond. I suppose that signifies the academics. There was no short leash to claw my way back in. Strangely, my main concerns were that my own taste would become immensely pretentious, or that I would not enjoy the films of which I was used to, due to me picking apart the inner logic of it all, like a carnivorous bird. I guess this is symbolic of the short leash I expected to be placed on. Often it seemed any creative powers I may have possessed originally had been stripped bare. For the interest of the parties, that's the African vulture. It's an enlightening experience to think of oneself well versed on a topic, only to be shown how incredibly wrong you were. There's a long way to go in honing your craft. Screenwriting, as for my experience, seems more a process of elimination than a process of construction. The removal of the unnecessary to craft something coherent that is pleasant for the ear, or so is the intention. Much like the whittling of a woodland fish. I didn't know the species, so I thought best not to say. Originality is in my mind now a completely artificial construct. The screenplay to me seems like a jigsaw, only with no picture on the box. The pieces are all there, but what you make is entirely your own. Order through chaos, as Jeff Goldblum so aptly remarks in Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, seems to be the prefix. One can argue that there is no right or wrong when it comes to a film, but I argue that empirical scientific method play just as much a part in the scientific method as our own subjectivity. Nevertheless, it has been an enlightening and thoroughly enjoyable experience thus far, though it seems daunting and yet an exciting prospect to try my hand at the craft in the context of the real world.